Well, hey, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Alan, and hello. This is the rest of the team. Keith there, and Alex and Will over there, and we represent the open source team at Anchore. Let me just make sure all the volumes are working. I think they are. If hopefully someone in chat at some point will tell us if it's not. So we do this every Thursday. I'll do the quick version of the intro. We have lots to get through. We discuss open issues and maybe pull requests across a whole range of open source software, and this gives us an opportunity to discuss, all kinds of things, issues people raise, or topics that we want to bring up. It's just a gentle, relaxed stream. You can find out more about everything that the team do if you go to anchor.com/open source, or if you want to go straight to GitHub. If you go to github.com/anchor, you'll find all the repositories. Let me make that a little bit bigger. That's much better. Just scroll down. You'll see all of the wonderful open source goodness that these guys work on. And if you want to talk to everyone, you'll find Discourse, which is the quick link to that is anchor.com/discourse. I start a thread every time we do this on a Thursday, and in it I list some things that we might want to talk about. If there's any updates, there was a couple of releases out this week, I do believe. So yeah, a whole load of releases cranked out. Stereoscope, Syft, Grype, all the gang. And there's a link to Needs Discussion, but I think we had one topic that Will wanted to jump on first. So my stupid camera keeps going to sleep. One day I'll get that fixed. Let's dive straight into this one, which is a question that was asked on Discourse. I'll post the link into the chat over there on YouTube. Take it away, Will. Where do we start?
Yeah, so this person had what I thought was a very good question. They're running a Rails app, building in Docker on Ubuntu Jammy, whatever version of Ubuntu that is, and they scan it. And they get just this wall of CVEs that are reported against Go standard library 1.18.5 and like 1.23 point something just released. So this is a little bit older Go. But their question is like, what do I do about this? Because they don't actually have, nobody ran sudo apt-get install standard lib at 1.85 in this image. There's just executables in the image, and Syft will take apart Go executables and see what version of different dependencies are in them, because the Go compiler is nice enough to write things down in a way that we can read. But they all Go binaries have the Go standard library compiled into them. And so I thought that this user experience could really be improved. And I replied with a couple of JQ commands or piping to Grype explain or something to learn the paths, right? Because if you look at the JSON and find the path to the affected file, you can see where these are, right? I pulled down an old Prometheus image and it does the same thing. It gives me a wall of vulnerabilities against the Go standard lib, but they're all reported against opt-bin Prometheus or something like that. So it's very clear what to upgrade. If you look at the JSON and to look at the location of the vulnerable artifact, it's very clear to upgrade. But if you look at the default standard output of running Grype in this situation, especially if Go isn't your main, obviously if the server project was built in Go, you should probably just upgrade the whole thing, upgrade your own Go toolchain. But this is just Ubuntu has some Go binary somewhere that has an old thing in it, and there's no evidence what to do in the default output. And I thought that was UX we could make better, so I wanted to talk about how.
Go for it, Keith.
I was going to say the one thing I've seen. We've got another issue I was just looking for. I haven't quite found yet. Is a number of people have asked for the file locations being right there on the table, and just thinking about it practically. If I'm using Grype, for the purposes of trying to determine things to upgrade, I mean, that's going to be the most important thing to me. Like, okay, you've got a vulnerability. Here's where you go to find it. Or, potentially like, here's what you do to upgrade it. But I mean, the Go is especially challenging here because it's really generic and, it applies to a whole bunch of different things in a bunch of different locations that are not Go specifically. They're executables. So, I mean, I think like from my perspective, having an easy way to get like a list of the locations and the vulnerabilities seems like one of the obvious solutions here.
And the table output, it's like a challenge because it's like, well, the more things we add to the table output, not only does the table get wider, but it also, you're adding more rows in this case. So if you actually had multiple binaries that were being built with like Go on 18, then you would like dupe the rows for every location. And so then, so it kind of comes down to this, like, what's the right balance here? Just like with the, like one thing I'll call out is like the table is supposed to be like a summary. It's supposed to be able to like, it's lossy. It's trying to tell you like, here's your list of vulnerabilities. For vulnerabilities is kind of like the thing that, that's almost first.
Right. And oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I feel because I feel like what it kind of leads to, like, is because like adding a column to the table, like I definitely get that it's like the easiest thing to reach for, and it's like it's very obvious, which is why we had a lot of users like ask for that specifically. But I kind of wonder if there's another way where we can preserve the table's like terseness, grockability for vulnerabilities, but then have an alternative way to hint, like here is a another view into the same information that gives you location. Like it could show up after the table. It could be something that like after the table shows up, we have a hint down below that says run this to get this different perspective. Like, it could be that we have a TUI where we show all these views, but you can swap between them really nicely. Okay, so that's my initial thought.
So an example like that I've seen is you've reminded me of the snap command, the snap packaging command on Linux. If you do snap changes, it shows you a list of just a summary, right? But if you want to do detail, you'll notice that each change has an ID. And if I do snap change 1979, I pick one of them, the most recent one, it shows you like more detail. It like allows you to like drill into that line. So that that some way of being able to on the command line saying that one there I want to like drill into and find that extra information, whether it's the file list or that kind of thing could be worth doing. But then does that mean you've got to maintain state between each run?
Kind of reminds me of Explain in some sense.
So
not the same thing, today, but like ish.
Yeah, but it might be worth explaining Grype Explain really quick. So Grype Explain is an experimental command I built maybe a year ago that takes Grype's JSON output on standard in and then renders human readable text about specific vulnerability IDs. So you can do like Grype-o JSON, whatever. So if you have a Grype JSON input, and the idea, like I originally built it because people, like, one of the issue requests that we get most often is I built an image and Grype says it's vulnerable to foo and I didn't install foo and I don't think you're right. And Grype Explain is really helpful for investigating those because it tells you sort of why Grype thinks it. And you could achieve the same text by like piping Grype-o JSON through a bunch of JQ commands. It's not composing original text, it's just rearranging things that it already had. But that's useful for zooming in on one vulnerability. And I recommended it here, but I also recommended a quick JQ command that was just like, give everybody the path. So yeah, Alan, so the way you want to, get an ID from this, and then
like that.
Yeah, but you need to pass, like it takes Grype JSON on standard in because it doesn't maintain any state. So just do like -o JSON pipe what you were about to run.
Great. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And like that's pretty clunky UX, and that's honestly because I didn't figure out where in Grype's internal data model to wire up building the explanation, and just did it at the very end of the pipe. But you'll get some output like this.
Nice.
And so you can say there's some useful stuff in here. So we can say it's a direct match, package name, version, and ecosystem. The other kinds of match are an indirect match, which is where an RPM or a deb might declare that it's downstream of another RPM or deb that has a vulnerability. So that will give you an indirect match. This is a match against an upstream package. And then it'll also say it's a CPE match if it was a CPE match. And so this is, if you want to sort of understand why, like what this vulnerability is and why Grype thinks it's there, this is a pretty useful command. But it's actually like a lot of work if you just want to know, like, we found Go standard lib, but like, what did we find it in? Right, that's a much simpler question. And the JQ command does it, but it seems unreasonable to expect our users to write that much JQ. So,
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we've got a missed opportunity for a pile of snippets that answer these very specific questions, and they're all just little snippets of JQ, like Will's JQ library, like you sitting in front of a pile of books, and they're all books full of JQ. I don't know. Maybe that's just my imagination going.
I mean, the recursive search on my search history from my command line is literally just like a spell book. Like I don't think of the commands anymore. I just Control R, find the thing before, and it just gives me what I want. So I agree that we should be able to distribute the spell book to everyone.
Anyway, so a snippet library is a good idea, or a template library is a good idea. But I wonder if we should change Grype itself. Like one of the things I thought of is like a different table output that is like grouped by package instead of this is grouped by a match. And you can think of a match as just a package and a CVE where we believe that the CVE applies to the package. Each row in the table output is that. And the name for that internally is a match.
This is what I was trying to say.
It might be nice to have another way to say it and like group by location, right? So like the column that's unique is a path, and then it tells you all the CVEs against each path or something. Those might be really valuable, and I think that this question is a really clear signal that we need something like that, because just getting a wall of things that all say standard lib. I was also wondering if there's something we could do, because with Go is interesting because there's two packages, right? We found a Go executable, and then inside the Go executable, we found the Go runtime, and that's what the standard lib package is. But like, it doesn't say, there's nothing that says what package we found that in. And so,
sorry.
There's nothing that says what package we found that in. And so, I don't know. What if we said like standard lib parentheses, like the name of the file name of the Go executable that the standard lib was in, or something? Like, I don't know if there's something simple we could add here for the particular case. What do people think of the idea of a different table output that's like a different, I don't know, kind of rotating it, like group by CVE or group by package or something like that?
That's what I was trying to describe earlier, which is like, it'd be kind of like a pivot table. Like today we trying to preserve that summarization element, and like as you add columns, you lose that summarization. But yeah, I was trying to describe like, well, what if you just can pivot it to something else? And I didn't know so that could be like via a flag, which means it's no longer it's like we're kind of breaking that default output assumption. Like you would have to go run it again to go get the the right pivot you're interested in? Or what if it was a TUI where it's like, when you find results, it bounces you into a TUI. The TUI is the table output, and then you can just dynamically pivot as you wish via selection there.
My feeling about that is that like that would be kind of cool, but most people are going to be seeing output in logs in a CI job or something like that. And so, that is a nice to have, but getting the locations of the things visible like on a regular basis is really what, like by default, is what they need. But I absolutely, that's exactly the thing I was gonna like, I went to as well. Like, what if we did a pivot table that's based on the location? Like, it sort of depends on what your usage of Grype is, but a lot of people I think have that very same usage, which is show me exactly what I need to change to update the things I need to update.
Can we leverage other people's TUIs like FX or some other, I guess, this is not super pleasant either. You want something that's not just displaying the JSON, but displaying something, in a pleasant way.
Nothing comes to mind for like table, because for JSON, like there's all sorts of tooling around, but if we're saying table,
We'd have
Chris.
No, go ahead, Alex. You also.
Well, also, I head on to Keith, like this being the TUI being default. Is probably not a good idea because of the which is we need to like make certain that we're outputting a report that's useful in CI in terms when you don't have a TTY. We shouldn't be doing things like detecting TTY, then we do TUI, don't detect TTY. When we don't see a TTY, then we like do a report that's like too surprising. So I like anything that I was suggesting there that would be dynamic would probably be like not the default output. It would have to be like you opt into it. -O TUI.
Maybe dash interactive, right? And then it drops you into something that, because I think people have that. They've seen that in other tools, like in a Git rebase or something, where dash interactive drops you into a thing that you can interact with for a little bit.
I would plus one the interactive approach, because like if we tried to make the table output too fancy, we ran into this in Grant a little bit, where you'd run like nested. So like if you sorted by package, it'd be package at the top and all licenses below it. Or if you sorted by license, it'd be license at the top with all packages below it. And the table nesting, like when you actually start doing that hierarchy, it makes the report like less friendly than when it's flat in Grype's case. So if you want something that can pivot around like a vertice of a data point, then interactive is the way to go. But if you just want something that shows up in CI, then flat, nothing complex is probably the best, like most readable format. We would get into that table design and we'd find very quickly that we don't like it, I think.
What would you all think? A couple of people have built some pretty slick HTML template files. So if we wanted a really quick, we could do -O HTML and like write an index.html somewhere and that you could just open in the browser. I don't know what that is. What's that?
Yeah, I don't. This is not what I expected.
What is it?
JLV. It's a JSON log viewer, but I'm doing it wrong.
Yeah, so, I don't think it wouldn't be. Yeah, the document is not also, a log.
Yeah, it prints. Honestly, if you piped that to JQ.matches pipe JLV, it might be better. But like Grype's JSON output is a single giant object, which is probably not what JSON log viewer is expecting.
It wants multiple
judging by the
objects.
Yes, of course. It wants a big dictionary or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So we have a table of contents of stuff here. I think it's now about like kind of writing down those things where like probably priority is like the things that are most like useful and easily implementable first. And so like, so adding flags on the CLI to change the table output, or outputting the HTML template, probably like float to the top, and things like TUI float to the bottom. but we don't know if we believe in that. So, yeah, are we there, or do we think there's more discussion here? Or Chris is like, no, but I was saying we probably shouldn't do this.
No. I did the facial expression because I sympathize with the user that they're just asking for like something simple that can make all these standard libs like discernible from each other. That kind of shows the root evidence, but then I like grimaced because all of those things are like lists and multiple values of multiple. Like it could be like you could have a list of files that were all found under 1.22.5 or some vulnerable version of Go. And so it's like I'm cringing because the display, it seems like a simple question and the display is very hard. Like it disturbs the current output like too much. And I want to give them a simple fix answer and it's hard.
Yeah, I think the template is the simple workaround. It's like, here's the template that gets you what you're trying to do. So, which is what Alan, you were highlighting.
We kind of talked about this last week when we were talking about templating language for output. I don't know if it was Syft or Grype, but we were talking about like referencing the GH command and how you can use, you can pick the columns you want. And I wonder if there is like, a lot more to work on there to try and if there was I go back to the library of like reusable little snippets of like, here's a snippet if you want to focus on this slice of the data, and here's a snippet if you want to focus on that. And for now, the answer to that is JQ or some other, JSON parser of some kind. But in the future, it could be a template or formatting language or something. I don't know. But it feels like there is a quick answer for them, an ugly answer for them, and then a beautiful answer in the future.
Yeah.
To Chris's point, though, like, so I'll say hypothetically, let's just say that there was 100 binaries built with Go 118 in this. Well, if we go the templating approach, if we go output JSON like JQ approach, then in both of those cases, they're losing like the power that's like baked into the table view where it dedupes a lot of that. Because, if you have this many findings for 100 things, you're just going to get this many findings times 100. And there's until you start baking in these like bespoke functions that like you call and templating to get the deduped thing, you're just getting all the results and you're going to display fields out of it. So that's like the one thing out of that. It's like, yeah, we could do it and that would get them going. But then I feel like we would immediately get an issue the next week that says, hey, this shows 10,000 things, but it's really 100. It's like, well, yeah.
Yeah. That's why I was talking about like rotating and changing like which thing is unique, right? Because this has a row per match. And I think there were basically 4 other rows that like a row per location would be interesting, right? Where you have like a path and then like a list of CVEs at that path that maybe limits to 5 and puts in a ... or something, right? Because like this is the one that like the row per match is sort of the one that like naturally lines up with Grype's data model, right? Grype emits matches. That's what it does. But I think a row per package or a row per package version, something like that, and a row per vulnerability, right? Where you could get like, CVE 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 critical list of packages affected. CVE 1, like, because that would make this particular one, I think, a little bit simpler. And like by location would also really help because there might just be one Go binary in here, right?
Well,
and it would just say like at path found package Go standard lib found vulnerabilities.
But what if there's 100 locations and they like 100 like Go binaries with the same like Go 118.5 like. So this is not an argument against what you're saying, just to highlight. It's just that I feel like there's some swirl that like we got to go into to solve it. Because I think for what you're saying, it's like well, it's going to be a row per location, and then within each row, you have so like what is this like 30 items? Like each every one of those 100 rows would now have 30 sub rows or something. Like I haven't quite
right.
it.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that I think like package version would be an interesting like axis to orient around. So you have like, so like standard lib 118.5 is like a row, and then there's a hint of like what is present there. Maybe just like package version, highest severity CVE, a location or something would be really interesting. But it'd be really hard because you end up, you're right, either subsetting the data or swamping the terminal, and that's one of the reasons we haven't found, especially with like location data can be really long, right? I think Linux paths are allowed to be like 2K or 4K of Unicode now, and so like you get, even if you have a nice wide monitor, if I put a 900 character path on the end of your table output, it's hard to understand.
Right, but in an output, I guess the meaningful data, there's ways and means of doing that. Like if I go to oh, that's a very small directory. I was thinking of something. I haven't got a directory that's like really Grype DB.
That's unless
it's too small as well. Like when it's doing the search and index, it only shows you like ellipses in the middle and the beginning of the path and the end of the path. The bit that you might care about.
And that makes sense. But
I wonder if we're going to end up spending the entire hour on this.
Let's.
Yeah. How about this? I'm going to make an issue in Grype, and I'm going to make it like a spike, but because I actually don't want to try to like over rotate to this one example. I kind of want to use this one example as like a single use case into like hey, for Grype 1.0, what are all the like, let's go experiment. Like, what are ways that we think like on a per use case basis that are really grounded, that different ways to view this information and try to get that in to 1.0 or such that we can add it post 1.0 in like a non-breaking way, etc. So I can take the action to write that issue and I'll link back to this and whatnot.
Nice one. I do wonder if the fastest way to do this is to knock up a little Python utility that can just pull in the JSON and slice it in the 4 different ways in which, just call it Grype Viewer or something,
It's always faster in Python.
Yeah, I'm not trying to nerd snipe anyone into doing that, but if anyone did do that, then that would be cool. Nice one. Thank you for bringing that up, Will. That was a good topic. I like that. So we discussed that. I will add a thing here for whatever we discuss next. Did anyone have any others that they were itching to discuss? There's a fair number of these. Recently updated. This is the most recent one.
That one came from me. We discussed a lot about that earlier. Maybe, I don't know if the team wants to rehash it on the live stream or if there's other ones that were important.
If there's others that we're better off spending our time with, I'm fine with that. I don't.
Yeah. Unless you had like really new information. But yeah, I sort of agree. We just talked about that one.
Yeah, I actually took off the needs discussion on that one. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, no. Any others?
What's the possibly run Syft on a Docker file? So are they saying like I haven't built it yet? It's like a Docker file. Fun.
Yeah, I think that is what they're saying.
1074.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. Like it's. I don't think it would be a package SBOM is what would happen in the end. I feel like it would be something else. Or maybe we would look at the from line, pull down the container image there, catalog that, and then describe the things on top of it. I feel like you would get a different flavored SBOM in the end. Like I don't know how we would add any more packages than other what's in the from line, like in that image. I feel like we would be able to say, well, it would have referenced these tars because maybe we could, parse out some curls and wgets and be like, oh, these things are referenced and pulled down.
It's kind of what's weird to me is that we've always drawn this very clear distinction between like the source of the scan, whether it's like a container or like the analysis of the static code that Syft is being pointed at. And the scanning of a Docker file kind of means that there's both in the SBOM result. So like let's hypothetically, let's say like you scanned and ripped the first line out, and then you pulled that image down, you did a container scan on that. And then you merged the contents of that with a directory scan of all of the stuff that you have locally that might get like, if you did like source dot and migrated that into Docker, or like you found a line that copied one bin util that you had on your local directory and you moved it over to the Docker file system. You then are doing like this merged analysis of both. And we've never like kind of broached what that path or what that SBOM document would look like.
Wait, so that actually just does a Docker build basically, and then peers inside it. Is that? Am I?
Yeah, you're plus one. It runs the build tool for you.
Well, that just got less interesting.
Yeah, maybe this doesn't need much discussion because, I think
if that's
yeah.
If that's what they're asking, then I mean it is kind of interesting that like you would be just do an ad hoc throwaway build, like I mean,
haven't we said we don't want Syft to invoke local build tools, like and do like surprising things? Is building a Docker image a surprising thing for users? I don't think so.
We could, I mean, we could. I think building a Docker file is pretty surprising because it's just shell script, right? It can do lots of things. And I think scanning, I mean, it gets namespaced down and stuff, but it's fundamentally like untrusted code, and Syft doesn't like to exec things and doesn't by default, which I think is an important. I think doesn't at all, which is an important property. So maybe I think this needs discussion because it was in the pile of things to be triaged, and it didn't seem right to put it in the backlog or whatever. We could close it as not planned.
I plus one that. I don't want to see Syft executing a Docker build.
Let's sorry for taking up time on the stream. Let's do something else and close this one.
This is great because like closing something as not planned is informing the user that we're not going to do this, so that's fine.
Yeah, but do we think that on a non-build path, like so before we read that script, do we think there would ever be value in trying to pull down the image that's already created from the from line and like describe everything that happens after it, or do we think that's like still meh? Just give us the Docker image.
I don't think we could get anything that you can't get by reading the Docker file. Right? Like if the Docker file, like if I say, from Ubuntu latest apt-get install, I don't know, libssl or whatever, then I can tell, this is an Ubuntu system and somebody's installed libssl, and then I'm going to run Syft on that and I'm going to get an SBOM that says these are all the things that are in Ubuntu latest and someone installed libssl. But that's exactly what the Docker file says. So that doesn't seem valuable to me, but maybe I'm missing something in what you said.
Well, I mean, it could do almost anything and pull from almost anywhere, like private repositories that you're not going to be able to figure out what they are, right? So, it could just run a, install java.sh or, you wouldn't know necessarily what that is.
Yeah, I'm not saying I believe in what I'm saying, but I am saying that it's actually a lot closer to the same way that we say like scan a source repo that has requirements txt and tell me what's in there. It's not the same, but it is closer because it's, you haven't executed anything. Requirements txt tends to not have versions in them, or they have like version ranges, not like pens.
Right, but you wouldn't
Or
run pip
also can.
install before you do Syft on a requirements.txt, would you?
Well, you could, but like if you're pointing at just a source repo, like you haven't.
No, I'm saying we currently don't. There isn't
Oh
precedent
yeah,
for this. We
No,
wouldn't,
no, yeah, we
we,
don't
we don't
we
do
don't
npm
shell out
install. We don't do
because
cargo build. We don't do anything that's
we don't
yeah.
exec other binaries because we assume that we don't trust the artifact because it's a security tool.
right. Sorry, Keith, you were
Yeah.
going to say something then. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I mean, basically the same thing that you said. I mean, the build script, we could read it to our heart's content, but who knows what actually gets installed? Maybe there's some weird stuff that happens downstream, and we install OpenSSL, and it does a completely crazy thing. And like, it would be interesting to actually know that happened, but we wouldn't be able to infer it from, just in apt-get install OpenSSL necessarily.
Yeah.
You would be able to infer it from the base image, though, if it was doing anything nefarious and different regarding those packages. But again, that's that's not here or there.
I vote that we move on from.
Yeah,
this.
and we were saying close it, right? Fine.
Excellent. Right, do we have any others? I mean, we do. There's 4 pages of them. So
Yeah, let's keep going. Let's look at page 2. We've given this one.
I have a different output if it's easier. Like there's this
Oh,
output,
let's
which
see.
is the same stuff.
Memory usage. What's the binary classifier one from Weston?
This one.
3297? Yeah. Syft 30. I haven't seen this one.
Put it in the chat. Just gonna put it in here. 36.
Do not directly align.
Oh.
In this case, we observe the following.
What is NDB?
I haven't caught
Yeah,
up to that yet.
I think this is like, wait, what's the needs discussion of this for? Because I think it's just like if we need to distinguish between them.
Oh, the HA version of MySQL. Okay.
So I
We'll
think
add it
Will, you put needs discussion, Will.
Sorry, is there a link? Again, I was still trying to
Yep,
close
in
the
the
last
chat.
one. I haven't looked at this one yet.
3297 on Syft.
Let's see.
It's not currently.
I think I said needs discussion because of Weston's last comment, where he basically says, like, if we have a MySQL cluster, there's an additional binary, and I thought it was interesting to, like, it may be that with trying to use only the existing binary classifier approach, we need to identify another binary to identify the cluster components and then update the existing. And so it sounds like maybe it's really a needs investigation, but it sounded like he was sort of wanting to push the envelope on the current binary classification approach, which is something that I think is highly interesting.
The Python, some of the Python stuff, and I think you added this, but it's the ability to like have multiple files be part of the evidence, and like this sounds kind of like that, where like you would pull it. Like it sounds like there's a couple of these helper functions got to be pulled in order to like identify, and they might exist based off of what I'm reading here, but I would have to re-review those helper functions. But But yeah, identifying one package from multiple files, I think this might be covered today.
But is it? It's not covered under the binary classifier kind of pattern. We don't do it there, do we? We just do it in a separate cataloger.
No, we do it there for one specific thing, which is Python. There's a way to look up .so and a binary file and correlate them and get version information from the Python SO if we find a Python binary. It's pretty, like, that's the only thing that's doing it.
It's actually the first one in the... I was looking up the classifiers. It's the first one there.
Yeah, it's under the evidence matcher. That's cool. It's like try to find the information for the shared library lookup and then check the version in the binary itself. So one of these, this kind of like any number of evidence matchers being put into that function we could apply for this like MySQL cluster.
That makes it. Well, let's link to that pattern, and then I thought it was proposing like a novel pattern that it might be interesting to discuss. But it sounds like it's maybe not, and we should just say this needs to work like this Python classifier and put it in needs investigation backlog, something like that.
I do think it needs investigation, but I will definitely say up front, like, I'm actually not 100% certain what he's describing fits this example, but I mean, I think it's more of a needs investigation than discussion. So at this point,
Alan, I can link that code onto the issue and just say, here's the pattern. We think it might be able to go down. If not, investigate why it can't use this and build a new novel thing to propose for it. So
sweet.
Cataloger binary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just went looking to see if I could find a package that I could compare what the files look like on each, but it seems the MySQL cluster packages are supplied upstream by MySQL in their own repo. They're not in like Ubuntu or anything like that. I don't know if it's a licensing thing or what, but anyway, not interesting. Let's move on. Well, let's look for newest. Okay. I think we've looked at a lot of these.
what about the 872? It's on the second page. It's about issue with embedded components when scanning SBOM for vulnerabilities.
872.
Here, I'll put it in the chat.
I sorted by a different algorithm, didn't I? So there you go. Yep, got it. What time are we? 43. You've got it in the chat, have you? Okay, cool.
Indeed.
Sorry, bit of admin there. Okay. Should have been a commands on scanning S1 for
At the end of this, I'll mention one minor update.
Okay. Oh, so this is embedded environment, not there's no package manager, I guess. Ooh. Retro. So this sounds like a Grype v6, Grype DB v6, potentially.
Loosely. Well, and I linked one more thing down in the chat, which is a PR. They got merged yesterday. Yesterday. And so now in GrypeDB, we allow for folks that want to build their own databases, they may decide to pull in more CPE part part values than what we do. So today we pull an only application, but there's also like O for OS, H for hardware. And so, yeah, and so we still have the default for A, just to be clear. And I answered your question loosely on the V6 thing because, like, we don't want to pull in a bunch of extra. If we would say made the default, what's on the screen here, A and O, which is what this issue would require, then like that's going to flood the database with another. I think it was like 400,000 entries. It ended up being like another 10 megs to the database compressed. Not great, not terrible. But it's one of those like, well, if we do that, like we kind of want to know how is that going to perform against like common inputs. And this is where I kind of go into an ellipsis. Like I don't have a good spot to go and get like embedded material to use for vulnerability matching. Like, and in order to start this process, I feel like we definitely need to like start reaching out to the community in terms of like, okay, if we want this, like what are the right test points for us to prove that when we throw in this data in the database that it's even going to be worthwhile. So anyway,
I feel like there is a community of people who want this and may help us, find that kind of data, or at least, signpost the right direction for us to like get that data.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't want to get their hopes up and then say, well, we can't include that because it bloats the database too much. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, it's more of a why bloat the database if we don't know if it's going to help. So it's almost like we really want, like we kind of want to go find some like high quality SBOMs in the embedded space and show like, hey, did these pair up well with NVD, which is what they're going to match against, or do they not? Because if they don't, then like there's no value in adding it in Grype. We kind of need to go upstream and go find high quality SBOMs in the embedded space, and so it's kind of because right now Syft does not craft those. Like there is no good source like for Syft to go and craft high quality like SBOMs for the embedded space today, and so it's like I think this might be a good pivot point to or like this issue as a good way to go find those, but B, like engage with folks that are creating these SBOMs because they're getting them somehow, like, and ask like, how are you creating these? Like, what was the painful way? What was the easy way? Like, so maybe that could be lessons learned not only in Grype for our data for NPT and doing the matching with CPEs there, but also in Syft, and like maybe there's other catalogers that we just haven't thought of yet that would help craft those SBOMs.
Yeah, we had a request opened for a VC package cataloger from someone who is doing embedded systems work. It's I don't know anything about it, but it's a C++ package manager. And then they ended up deciding not to build a cataloger for Syft because they could configure VC package to write a CDX SBOM into the output directory. So that's an interesting, like, I wonder if we'll see a lot of that where like if you're building something embedded, like you need to have quite a bit of control over the build process, right? Because you have like specific hardware. And so it could be that an output of whatever your process is that makes like little widgets with custom software on them also produces SBOMs that accurately describes those. But it would be interesting then it would become more of a Grype question. Like if you do a VC package build and flash it onto a given thing, like, and hand that CDX file off to Grype, can Grype tell you useful things about it? It's an interesting question.
Where's that gone?
I think
Sorry, I went looking at the person who filed the bug report. I thought, well, maybe they're using something to generate the SBOMs that, is able to do this. And it looks like, if they got some crazy scripts in here that do this for them.
So I haven't looked yet. So but it's more of it's just a way in. So and it might be this. There's no other discussion. I'm not. Don't know. But I mean, so like, Will, your comment at the very bottom of this was like, well, like including more than just the A component or A CPU
Yeah,
types would be
I
step
think
one.
what I really the thing I'm really getting at is like I think on Schema V5 we just can't put any more stuff in there. Like Schema V5 is already a little painful to download, and so putting in 1,000,000 more rows or 100,000 more rows or however many it is that we can't match against today is sort of a non-starter. But like, if we didn't have the space constraint, like, is there a good reason not to include those, or should we start thinking about including them? I think it might be worth doing a spike in V6 and just saying, because that has like better data locality and is better compressibility. We could also host an alternate version of the database somewhere if we wanted to. I sort of
I don't.
like GrypeDB and Funnel are open source, and somebody could just run the tool with a different config. And actually, now that it's a native like configuration option in GrypeDB, somebody doesn't have to run a fork of GrypeDB. They just have to run it with a different config file than we do, which I think is a much more reasonable ask. So I don't know. I guess I was sort of trying to get at like, is there a reason besides we don't use it right this second and the file is already too big not to include this stuff? So that as those two reasons become invalid, we can start including it. And maybe we run a once a week like GrypeDB with with O and H CPEs in it, and just put the URL, like reply with the URL to people like this, and just say like point Grype at this URL and do GrypeDB update, and you're fine. That would be sort of cool.
How much?
Especially if it doesn't get absolutely hammered the way the main GrypeDB URL does, then it wouldn't be very operationally difficult. So
I don't think that would strain our actions too much, as long as we don't bake it into the other builds that are done like every 6 hours. If we just did the one that's like nightly, then yeah, it's just like a separate parallel block that has the new options that Alex put in, and it's a URL that's not in the default tool at all. It's just one that exists in static space that we can link on issues and be like, well, try this out. Experimental. Hold this down. Don't do it at a coffee shop. Please don't do it at a coffee shop.
I mean,
Please.
you can do it in a coffee shop if you have all day. This is the environment where you're able to change
Do
credits
it in
down.
a coffee shop you don't like. Yeah.
Yeah, eat everyone's bandwidth at this coffee shop.
I think that's a great idea. And I mean, the other nice thing there is it helps with what Alex was saying earlier, which is like people who have these SBOMs, they can actually go and test it out and see what the matching like actually behaves like. So yeah.
So maybe action out of this is to figure out, because we're saying do this nightly. So if that's the case, what would it take to do the plumbing for this in the GrypeDB repo? So operationally, we're making like a side database that folks can reference.
Does it need to be nightly? Like,
Yeah,
It's kind of my thought. Does it? If it doesn't, maybe we just build it
for
once
testing,
and throw it up somewhere.
like,
What? Yeah.
Once a week.
We could also just make it on Workflow Dispatcher. Or like once a week is pretty good. Like, and then we could say like, hi, if you point Grype at this database and pull it in, like, there might be other code issues, but I don't know. Are we okay saying we're going to do this on the issue? Is that the resolution of the discussion? And just say like, two things, like there's a config option in GrypeDB now, so you can build your own database with it, and we might see how hard it is to run a separate database that you can download.
Yeah. I think, yeah, we'll just make a one-time ad hoc database. We put, host up where we're hosting our other databases or right next to it somewhere.
Yeah.
Just link it here in the issue.
Okay.
Call to action. Like, we are interested in folks that have embedded SBOMs, the performance of what this does with today's like CPE processing for this database, like, and we're willing to work with you on this. So like, just please shout out.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. I think a one-off in this alongside all the other databases so we know it's hosted reliably, and so if people hammer it repeatedly in order to test it, because that's what we're asking them to do, right? Then we're not going to fall foul of some GitHub hosting limit or something.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I can write a response that just says like it's now possible to run GrypeDB with these turned on, and we plan to build this database once and host it at a URL. We'll reply here with it, and please let us know how it works for you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good work. We've only got a few minutes left. What do you want to start with? A quick issue or wrap up or what?
Let's do a large architectural one.
Yeah.
Spin the wheel. Is that what we're saying?
Spin the wheel. Okay.
Spin the bug wheel.
Well, we already have one here. What is this? 1 year ago. What's this in? This is in scan action.
Be useful to specify the location similar to its done in the command line, but stale.
I think this is in
Ready.
This isn't OSS ready. This is something we would do today if we had bandwidth, right? So
yeah, if we
Sweet.
yeah,
and it already says so. So
okay, that was easy. So
one more.
ooh, syntax errors. Ooh,
That
I know
looks
this
like
one.
this is in backlog. So
Oh, SBOM actions.
Yeah. Keyless attestation in SBOM action. You still have to take actions though for keyless attestation. I am unfamiliar with how to do this in a non-interactive way where you would provide your OICD credentials in the pipeline to just do it.
Well,
Like-
I think that's just it. I think because it'd be so like GitHub runners have the OIDC token. OICD? OIDC. I'll have to look that up again. So I think you could just use it there with no action. Like in other CI, I agree. I don't know how that would work because you're right. It needs interaction, but I think for GitHub Actions, you can do it automatically.
You want
Because it's a token.
You can use the token from the GitHub Actions to sign off as like, yes, this comes from our service account on GitHub that ran this action that built this, and it's attesting to that.
cool.
Is that what people want for the like? I guess that's
I
what
think
you
so.
want.
I mean, that's
you want
what-
to sign off on the SBOM as like being produced.
That's what keyless attestation is, right? Is it saying like I am authenticated with this third-party service that you trust at the time when I sign this document, right? I think that's effectively what it's saying.
Yeah, but it kind of
Correct
gets
me if I'm wrong.
No, it definitely does do that. But then it gives like the domain would be a github.com domain. And then let's say like everyone goes, "Oh, I trust GitHub domains," right? I've signed off with this GitHub worker. But then like any person can make like a service worker that is a GitHub account. Like I have to look at like the domain model for what gets signed off when you do this, because then you're just saying like we trust everything from GitHub, even if it's just some actor that's using the free public space to sign off on an attestation. Like if everyone has access to it, then
Well, I'm assuming that the signature
has the
is like a
organization?
GitHub account, not just like it would say like someone who was signed into GitHub as this person, or like a workflow that had permissions to like write security events to github.com/Anchore or whatever, right? Like I don't think it just says github.com said it was okay, right? I mean, posting it on the releases says github.com said it was okay in a sense. So I think it needs a little investigation or research, but I think it can be in the backlog. Does that?
But I think I mean, I
plus,
think
plus one. Send it in the backlog for sure to be done.
Oh, it already is.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think the answer is that like when it comes from like the tokens that actions that like etc. like the claim has in it the repository and the workflow, and I I want to say it even says the branch where it ran from. So like you could see from the attestation material, I think, those things. So like it's not only just a GitHub.com thing, but it's also like, oh, it ran in this repo, it ran from the main branch, and it ran from the release.yaml at commit X. So I think it's like addressable.
Yeah,
from
I
that
just
perspective.
I just looked up the GitHub documentation for verifying attestations that come from things that use their token, and it puts the organization name, repository name. You could even include an annotation for the branch, like you said, Alex. So it's scoped, and it's not just like GitHub.com, but like if you're building a security model to say I trust attestations from somewhere, then under someone that signed off using a GitHub token, you would have a list of organizations that you trust. And if they didn't come from that, then you would just say, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take this in or trust that this was built. Thumbs up.
We're over the hour. Do we have an answer for this, or is this just we just need more research and time?
Syft does support keyless attestation. It's just moving it into the SPUM action, so it's not interactive. So just, yeah, I think it needs research, but the status is for us to pick up and research it.
Yeah, someone needs to actually, like, I think the output of the research is like, if there's no code needed, like we should show an example in like the documentation or something on how to do that. So.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for everyone. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time as always. And we'll see you again next week. You may have noticed, you guys probably won't have noticed this, but on the side of the screen there is a cycle above the chat, is cycling through each of the projects with the number of stars. And I just noticed that Syft is like 6,113. And we had a minor celebration recently that Syft had just got past 6K. And as it's rotating around each of these, I'm seeing Grype DB on a lowly 34. I think some of these, we could get a bit of love on some of these and get them like a little bit higher.
But there is an open issue saying, should we combine the Grype and Grype TV projects too? So maybe your wish will come true. Yeah.
That fixes that. What about Funnel? That's 74. That could get to 100 by the end of the year. I am certain. Right. Thank you again, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. And we'll see you all again next week for more of this nonsense.